Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Fundraising as a Sales Process, Finding and Closing Investors. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I'm a program assistant at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. Definitely check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. And second, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. Awesome. California, Oregon, Panama, Canada, Missouri, Australia, Florida. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. So before we get started, I'm just going to launch a couple polls to step back, see how everyone's doing today, and we'll use this information to guide our future development of programs. So this one's going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? Give everyone a few moments to submit their responses. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end this poll, share the results. Looks like optimism is in the lead, but survival is behind. So we will keep that in mind, and hopefully some of what we talk about will address these feelings today. And I'm going to stop sharing and launch the second poll. What is keeping you up at night? Give everyone a few more moments to submit their responses here. And this just tells us a little bit more about your current entrepreneurial needs. Awesome. Thanks for participating. Gonna end this poll, share the results. Looks like finance is in the lead, sales behind, but we got all across the board. So we'll keep this in mind for our programming in the future. All right, gonna stop sharing that poll. And without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, Mayra Ceja, Startup Scout, VC Partnerships at HubSpot, and podcast host at Venture Unplugged. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Michelle, for that awesome introduction. Everyone, I'm so excited to be here. We have an exciting hour. I hope that all of you are as participatory as possible. This is ultimately your hour. I know this stuff. This is about you guys getting the knowledge that you need. So feel free to ask any questions as I go along. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. So bear with me. All right. So unless anybody stops me, I'm going to assume you guys can see the right screen. So we're talking today about fundraising as a sales process, finding and closing investors. And I wanted to start off with a couple of quick intros. So this is brought to you in part with partnership with HubSpot for Startups. Please do know that as part of our partnership, everybody here on this call receives a free CRM and also a free investor management tool, which we'll be talking about today. And then also you're also eligible for up to 30% off any of our software packages by using this link right there. You guys can keep that. We'll also circle around this deck later on. But before we get started, I also wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm so passionate about this topic. So I currently am with HubSpot, and I teach over 4,000 startups a year on go-to-market strategy, sales marketing, and also fundraising, which is my favorite topic, because before this, I was a venture capitalist where I invested in over 21 startups. And for fun, I also have a podcast called Venture Unplugged, and I'm also launching a new newsletter on startups and food. So go ahead and check that out. We'll actually drop it into the chat when we get a moment. But without further ado, for today's agenda, we are going to be talking about part one, the investor strategy. Two, we're also going to be talking about tools. So we're going to start off with the pipeline. How do you actually find investors, some email templates, and then I'm also going to give you some hot tips on the best tools out there. So let's get started. I hope you're all ready. All right. So as a founder, your biggest challenge is going to be time and money, right? So time to build your product, time to find investors, all of this, and then also doing it under a small budget and try to get more budget so you can do more, right? So as we think through, the goal of this webinar is very simple. How do we save time and how do we actually get you closer to that yes? And so we want to start off first with thinking about our fundraising process as a sales process. And we want to be thinking about an investor pipeline. So first of all, this is the way I would set it up. You can have some variations to it, but this is in general terms of what you're looking for, right? You're looking at a big list of qualified investors. You're also looking at a pitch meeting, some demo, right? A couple of different meetings, due diligence, process, legal. Then you actually have to measure if it went cash into the bank. That's the final step and the most important step. But then you also want to be looking at who did you win and then who did you also lose. And I'm going to tell you why this is very important, because each step of the process, you want to be thinking about not only how do you get that person into the funnel at the beginning, but then how do you actually move them along? What I see is that a lot of startups tend to talk to a lot of investors, have great initial first meetings, but never close that check. And this ultimately is about how do you close that check? So first of all, we want to be thinking about, right, not only do you talk to any investor out there, all investors are not created equal. So you want to be thinking about what's a qualified investor for you. And I guess I'll put it into the chat if any of you want to quickly respond. Are you guys raising your seed, your A, your angel round? That'll give me a sense of who's in the audience. But I mentioned that, great, Victoria's raising a seed, Emily a seed, Rusul a seed, Betty angel round, Abdel a seed, pre-seed, seed to A, great, seed, excellent, some pre-seeds, NGO, seed to A, great. This is what I'm going to show you today is actually applicable to all levels of fundraising, but it's particularly important as you think through each level, right? How are you running your process? Because at the end, once you take that first initial capital, right, whether that's angel or seed or A, you're going to be doing this process again. And the more comfortable you get, the better you get at it, the easier it's going to be for you and the less time you spend on it and the more quality time you spend both directly with investors and also on your product. And so as most of you were mentioning, right, seed to A or angel, this qualification is important because it's actually going to help you qualify investors. Not every person with a checkbook is a right fit for you. You want to be asking questions about from that investor, like, hey, investor, right? What's the average check size that you do? The reason why I mentioned this is because I see most startups spending a lot of time with the wrong investors. For example, if an investor only invests $1 million, right? And you're like, great, that's awesome. But you're only fundraising 800,000 or even $1 million, that investor is not a good fit for you at this time because that investor does not want to be 100% of your whole investment, right? They're going to want to have you bring in a few other investors to fill out that round. So that investor is actually looking for, if they're putting in $1 million, they're looking for somebody else to bring in another $1 million or 2 other people, right, to bring in another 500K. So think about, is this the right size check of this investor? Does it make sense? The other way that you can qualify investors is by check size, but then also by industry. So you have to ask them and ask yourself, right? Does this investor invest in my industry? Most early stage and pre-seed investors are generalists, which means that they'll invest in a variety of different things. However, there are certain fields where you need to be asking this question more diligently. For example, if you're in biotech, there's certain types of investors that invest in biotech with open arms, and there's other investors that don't. That's not a good or a bad thing. That's just means that it allows you then to filter out who's going to be a good fit for you. So the first step when we think about this qualified investors is figuring out what questions are important for you to be asking investors so that you can also qualify them. Similarly, as you would qualify a sales lead, right? And so the other questions that you might ask is geography. We saw people from different areas in the chat today. Some investors are okay investing internationally. Other investors are not. That's not a good or a bad thing. That's just a fact. And you want to be asking these factual questions because, again, it allows you not to waste time with somebody who's never going to invest in your region, who's never going to invest in your industry, or whose check size is too small or too big, right? And then that allows you to categorize them. And so all this knowledge is actually going to start arming you with and having you take some control over the process so that you're able to move this along much more efficiently. So remember, the first step, qualifying your investor. What does that mean for you, right? The second step is going to be this idea of a pitch deck, pitch meeting. You can call it demo, whatever you want to call it. There's either one or a series of meetings. Then there's a due diligence phase. All of you, I want you to make sure that you have this data room. If you haven't heard of a data room is eventually you're going to need it right before you go into sort of this legal review during this due diligence phase. So the data room has all your documents of incorporation, all of that. Again, but if you think about it ahead, you'll have that set up because at these pitch meetings, once that investor says, yes, I want to invest, but we still need to do due diligence and legal, great, awesome. Here's my package. It's easy for you to do. And for those of you who have more questions around what's a data room, how do I make one? So it's basically like a Dropbox folder where you put in your legal documents. There are good checklists out there, so you can Google data room for startups, and it'll give you a quick checklist as to what should be in there. Most of them tend to be the same, so don't overthink this piece of it. Just make sure that you have it so that you can smooth out the process. And then remember, cash in the bank, you want to make sure, right, that once they send the legal, right, you actually get them to send the money as soon as possible. The only way that you're going to do this is if you're actually tracking this process and tracking this flow. That's why creating an investor pipeline is absolutely crucial. The last two steps are super important as well, because obviously we love a closed one. The next best thing is a close lost for the good reason. So most of you mentioned a series of fundraising events. So think about why you close lossless. Maybe it's okay if they were too big for this round. Maybe they want to see you in the next round. Okay, awesome. Great. Let's make sure we keep in touch with them and have a way to manage those communications. Or maybe your pitch was off. Great. That gives you information as to how you can improve your pitch, right? So just think about it as an entire process, how you're following it through, thinking about also a timeline projection to this. Most people underestimate how long it's going to take and how much money that they need. So most likely, whatever number that you have in your head, it's probably going to take you twice as long and you're probably going to need twice as much money. That said, you can shorten that time period, right? By having a tighter funnel and pipeline here. And that's why you want to be keeping track. The other sort of hot tip that isn't talked about is how do you actually manage this, right? So at the very beginning, when you think about this qualified investor, you want to ask them up front, being like, hey, what is your process like? How long do you think it's going to take for us to get to a closed check on average, right? And they're going to say, oh, it's going to take 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever that number is, it's okay, but now you know. And now you know when it's past 6 weeks and they're still trying to review in their committee or something else, that's okay. But now you have permission to follow up with them and ask them, hey, can we you can go ahead and follow up with them and say, hey, you told me it was going to take around 6 weeks. It's been around 6 weeks. Is there anything else that you need? Are we still on track? Now you can ask more questions. So again, thinking about it as a pipeline, thinking about it as a sales process now allows you and gives you permission to ask very unique questions and really empowers you throughout the whole process so that you're not wasting time in the wrong areas, in the wrong sections, or simply forgotten about these. Remember, you're going to be talking to 50 investors at any given point, and you need to figure out at what stage in that pipeline are they in, which ones are going to be more urgent, which ones are not, which ones need follow-up, which ones need follow-up for the next 6 months, next year, whatever that is. And the only way you're going to do that is if you set up a system and you set up some tools. So any quick questions there? Then I'm going to keep going. All right. So let's talk about investor outreach. Many of you want to know, how do I reach out to investors? How do I talk to them? How do I get them to talk to me? Okay, so there's definitely a couple of pro tips that you can use. And in addition to that, there's also some templates I'm going to include right after this. But when we think about investor outreach, it's very similar to a sales process, right? We want to be thinking about prospects, which means every investor under the sun, narrowing that down to, remember, we talked about check size, location, industry, right? And then doing a little bit of research additionally for lead qualification when you're talking to them, asking them questions or looking on Crunchbase, right? Do they invest in similar things? Additionally, the other piece is that not only are you looking for a firm that might invest in you, but you're also trying to identify which partner is most likely interested in you. So in the larger firms, right, like Norwest, Sequoia, they'll invest in anything, but not every partner invests in everything. So you want to figure out who's the right investor for you to try to reach out to, for you to try to talk to, so that then you're actually looking at that qualified lead investor. And then as you move them through that sales process, through that pipeline that we talked about, you can move them towards intent and close lost. Now, when you're thinking about investor outreach, there's a couple of ways to go about this. Everybody says a referral is best, and it is best, but they can also take some time and they're not always available. So I'll go over the first step when you're asking for referrals. When you're asking for referrals, you want to be looking not only at your direct network, so not only your first degrees within LinkedIn, but you can also look at second degrees and try to get an introduction to that person and then get the way in. So by that, I mean, like, maybe you don't know somebody directly at the VC firm that you're targeting, but you do know another founder, right, that either knows them or has received investment. The second, like, another great referral is if it happens from directly one of their portfolio companies. So think a little bit more creatively as to how do you reach those people. It may not be from your first direct connection. It might be from a second or third direct connection, and ask them, right, very clearly, how can I get connected to this person? I saw you guys were connected. Are you comfortable with this introduction? And so when we think about referrals, right, we want to be thinking about where else can we find them. So LinkedIn is a great source, friends, direct friends, any angel investors that you already have. You can also ask founders. Another one is you can also ask if you're banking with a larger bank. They usually have some business development person that has a lot of these introductions. And if you ask, they might be able to make those introductions. So think creatively. Or your legal team, right? Like, most of these people don't get asked for introductions, but that's also a great resource. The other things that you can get creative, right? Whether you're meeting with people in person or you're attending a webinar and then you directly reach out to them, but reach out to them in a meaningful way. When you do outreach, it's think about it from their perspective. Why would they respond? What would motivate them to respond? So for example, let's say they just did a webinar on fundraising and AMA, and you want them, you're curious, you saw something that's very similar to what you're doing. The more specific you can be with your outreach, the more likely they are to respond. So, hey, I just saw you on this webinar. You talked about X, Y, and Z. That's similar to what I'm doing. So think about creatively, how else can you get in touch with them? That, or if they've done like a podcast or any other material, and mentioning that is a great way to actually connect with them, and also do that cold outreach. Don't underestimate cold outreach. It still works. You just have to be compelling, right? Because you have to figure out a way to break through that noise that normally a direct referral introduction will make. But that said, I don't want people to be frozen by the lack of referrals or introductions. I see a lot of founders sit back on the sidelines by being like, oh, I'm waiting for like an introduction or a referral. You know what? The world is out there for you to go get. You're an entrepreneur. You are creating your own destiny. So cold calling investors is not going to be the end of the world. The worst they can do is not respond. The best that they can do is actually respond and make a connection. So again, it's kind of a second preferred method, but it still works. And remember, if your idea is compelling enough and you've done your research and that's the person you want to get to, try that. You can also try it in parallel to trying to get an introduction. If one works out first, great. Like don't let anything stop you from moving forward with your prospecting list. And the best thing to do is to identify, right? Here are my top 10 choices for investors. I want introductions here. And that's a great way to outreach to friends by being like, hey friends, I'm fundraising. This is the amount. Here is a total, or here are my top 10 investors. Anybody know anybody at these firms or how I can get to them? That's a great way to do this. So I'm going to move on to the next phase, and then we're going to also have some templates for you all to take a look at. So the other thing I talked briefly upon was investor management. When we think about investor management, we want to be thinking about how are you managing these communications, right? What types of communications do you need at each phase? And actually, how do you move them through that pipeline? At the end of each of these sections, you should be coming up with next steps. So once you've qualified them, right? Okay, great. I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to get a referral. At the end of the pitch meeting, here's a hot tip. You are in full control of that meeting. You're in full control of everything in your life. And by that, I mean, you're not in control of the outcome. You're in control of how that meeting is managed. You, during those 30 minutes, right, have the ability to manage the conversation, making sure that their questions are asked. The hot tip question that you should always ask before leaving a meeting is actually, hey, investor, have I said anything or have I left anything unanswered that would prevent us from moving to the next step? Silence, be quiet, let them answer. They will answer, no, nothing, great, happy to move forward or whatnot. That allows you to then ask, great, can we move forward? What's the date? What's the timeline, right? Or they have the other route to go, which is, oh, you know what? I still had a question about X, Y, and Z. Oh, awesome. Happy to answer that. Or maybe you need to go back. Great. Awesome. Let me go do some research, blah, 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 and answer that. What you want to make sure is that at the end of these stages, that there's a step next to it and that there's a deadline to it, right? And that's up to you. That's the step that you manage, right? Investors aren't going to be chasing you down unless you happen to create, very few startups actually experience this idea of like FOMO, where a lot of investors want to reach you. You can accelerate that if you have multiple investors along the same pipeline structure, right, that we're looking at. But that is one thing that you can do, is try to run a process so that they're all kind of giving you offers at the same time, and then you create some competition around them. But for most people, you are in charge of managing that timeline, right? Most investors aren't knocking at your door necessarily to move to that next step. So you have to make sure that you stay on top of them and that you're managing your process completely. So think about, again, how are you managing that? If you're using an Excel sheet, it's probably not the best tool, and I'm going to show you a couple of better tools to do so. But think about what can work for you. All right. And then really quickly, you also want to be thinking about investor metrics as you're communicating with them, right? What do we think they're actually looking for? Here I just listed a few. We won't go into too much detail, but you want to make sure that you're looking right at MRR, a CAC payback. This means, right, how long does it take you to acquire a new customer and how long does it take you to come back? For those of you on MRR is a monthly recurring revenue, if you have any type of revenue, or projected revenue, right? You want to, for those of you who don't have revenue, you want to look at letters of intent, anything that can signify traction. All of these things are really about traction and storytelling. Logos. So, hey, we signed a letter of intent with X logos, trial customers, and then bringing up these metrics because these are going to go into your template, right? These are important because these are trigger words that make an investor pay attention. So you want to figure out, this is a few of them. There's more out there. Think about, great, how do I grab an investor's attention? What is my best statistic? And use that going forward. And remember, all of this is about narrative and opportunity. You are selling a vision to investors, not only about what your company can do, but what you can do. So part of how you manage this process, every time you're communicating with them, they're making a small judgment in the back of their minds as to how well you're going to be as a founder, as a CEO. So think about how important these communications are and why it's important to actually thread all these pieces together. All right, let's jump to this. All right, investor templates. So I'm going to go buy these, but they'll be available. And I'm going to tell you what's important about these. So you want to come up with a couple of templates. Here's one of them, which is the referral template. And I'm going to show you the tricks to this one. So pretty standard. Hi, Michelle. I saw you were connected. Can you introduce me to so-and-so? The trick to these introductions is actually doing a cut and paste and making Michelle's job easier, right? So you want to make sure that you have a cut and paste, whether they use it or not. Half of, like when I ask for referrals for anything that I want, half of them will use it and half of them will not. So remember, it's not about that. It's about, for those of you who want to use it and that'll get them over the edge, you're making it as easy as possible for them. So that's one email template that you should have in your back pocket. All right. Cold email investor outreach. And remember, all of it's cold until you actually have a relationship with them and you're just bantering back and forth and don't need the high, right? But when you think about cold email outreach, right? So a new investor, whether it's just introduced, it's cold. Think about when you're doing your brand new outreach, you want to start with a very clean email that gets to the heart of the matter, that tries to get their attention on something. Remember the metrics that they cared about? Figure out how you can include one of those, multiple of those, depending on how far along are you on your business. But you want to ultimately making sure that you connect with them, that you find some reason for them to be compelled to email you back, right? The whole game of the email is actually to get them to take some action back. Right? And this can be done through LinkedIn or email, but we're using this email template. And here you want to figure out something that's personal. You always start off with something personal, whether, hey, we have a mutual connection, we went to the same school. Two, I saw your blog on this, whatever it is, make sure that you personalize it something so that they know it's not just a copy and paste job. People really value that, and that goes a long way. Second piece of it, be very straightforward about what you're doing. Anything, you're just stating the facts. Action. Figure out what it doesn't have to be revenue. It could be customers, and we found this problem that's unique to the industry. Wow, 1,000 people and they all said X. That's kind of interesting. Ask for exactly what you want, which is a call, and include a meeting. Again,
All right. Looks like we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty there. So we're just gonna give Mayra a second, see if she's maybe fixing some stuff on her end.
Hello. Sorry about that. I'm
Hi,
back.
no worries. All right.
All right, let's try again where I left off.
Awesome. Sounds good.
For everyone.
Maybe if you could go back, just like one slide, or I just want to see where you were before because it was cut out for like a minute or two.
Oh, great. Okay. Is this a cold investor email? Did you guys get
Maybe
that?
go back one more slide.
Okay. Let me go. Referrals?
Yeah, if you could go
Okay.
over this slide again and go from there. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Sorry, tech difficulties, but this happens. And in your demos, it'll happen too. So you have to be prepared to just kind of keep rolling and managing the time, right? So we're going to go through these quickly, but I think they're important. I'm going to point out the things that are, which is when you're thinking about a referral, the one thing that you want to do is when you email somebody is make it very clear what you want from them and how this all fits into their world. I get asked, I just got asked this week alone for like 3 referrals from friends that I've known for a while, but they told me sort of what exactly did they want from me and how we're all connected, right? Hey, I saw you were connected to this person. Here's a simple cut and paste. The secret to actually getting people to do some of this for you is to do a cut and paste, right? So when you're asking somebody that you've trusted, that you've known for, that you have already an established relationship with, and you want to provide them with this cut and paste piece of it, half of the people will use it, half of the people will not. That's okay. But for those who need that extra push to get them over the line to actually make an introduction, that's what you want to have them. And keep the cut and paste simple, right? So here's my friend Startup Sammy, they're doing a new startup. Can I make an introduction, right? Or can I connect both of you? Something like that. Keep it simple, keep it in your own voice. This is my voice. Adapt it to yourself. But the key message here is you want to have a template for referrals and also include this cut and paste. So let's go to the other one. So when we look at the cold investor piece of it, you want to do one email that talks directly. How does this person personalize it with the first sentence? So either something that you've read, something that you know about them, some mutual connection, you went to the same school, same society, something, right? Then the next thing, say what your startup is. Don't be shy. Let them know that you're fundraising. This is not the time to hide things. And also make sure that you include one of those right things that we know investors are looking for right here, right? So anything that you have, whether it's even 1,000 customer interviews, all saying the same thing, validating something, they want to know, they want to hear a little bit of traction, enough to get them curious and think about, oh, great, I'll respond to Mayra. That sounds interesting. I wonder how she got that information or something like that. The key here with this email is very simple. Get them to respond by piquing their interest in something that you have, right? And think about what that is for you. And remember to include a meeting link, avoid the back and forth. A lot of investor outreach gets dropped in the time zone mismatch and going back and forth trying to find some time. Don't get stuck there and delay a lot of time. The other thing is that most startups actually stop at the first email outreach. And that also goes for your referrals. You should at least have a second one. And so think about what is your second email follow-up template. And here, I did a couple of tricks to it. So, hey, remind them what you were doing because they probably won't read through the whole thread. But then 2, do you have 15 minutes? Almost everybody has 15 minutes. But again, you're just facilitating because the thing is dialogue, like how can you facilitate the first initial dialogue? So here are 3 to 15 minutes, play around with what that next kind of small step is, and then do a third one. So people stop. And why should you stop? At some point you should, but this is not it. So you could do a third email. The third email is because things get busy and people, like, for whatever reason, you're like, okay, sounds interesting. Let me keep on thinking. You can follow up, but you have to be adding a new piece of information. So you can't follow up if it's the same thing, but you can say, hey, we just closed another deal and a new investor came in. Follow up if you have something new to share that's important. So make sure you have something new to share and do that. And the last email template that you can do is this breakup email, which is very similar to what you do in sales, but you can say, like, hey, I'm going to assume it's not interesting to you, but since I haven't heard from you, right, it's just not interesting or whatever. Do some sort of way of breaking it up. But you can also ask if they have like another POC and if there's a good time to schedule. So that's what we have for email templates. I'll make sure to include them. And I'm actually going to share a different screen and walk you guys through some of the tooling. Any quick questions, and then I'll incorporate them towards the end, but let's jump to this. All right. So, are you kidding me?
All right, looks like we're still working on getting it back up. Just give
Okay.
one more second.
What is happening? All right. Hello, Michelle.
No worries.
All right, let's try this again, my friend. All right. Did we catch everything towards the end? How long have I been out?
No, your sound is good, but we don't have the visual. There we go.
Okay. All right.
All right. There we go.
We're going to move on to some of the tools. And don't worry, I'll make the templates available. And if you guys have any questions, you all can reach me, but let's go through some of this. All right. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you have some sort of free or some CRM system. Ours is free. You're welcome to use that. You have the link to use it. Because you're going to see how this helps you drive an actual pipeline and a process that your Excel sheet or Google sheet can't. So the first thing that you want to do once you load it up, make sure you connect your personal email or your Gmail, whatever your company email that you're using, because you want to be keeping track of all your email messaging that you're doing. And that could be anything from open rates, right? You can obviously configure your email, but connect it to something so that you're able to track this. This is how you would connect ours, track that. The first step to creating an investor communication sort of list is, remember how at the beginning I told you guys about my newsletter? You guys should all be having a newsletter, and you guys should actually have 2 newsletters. One newsletter is for your investor friends, right? So people that you're fundraising from, and you write that to the audience of saying, hey, these are my business updates. Here's how you can help me. So whether it's I'm looking to hire a new UX person temporarily or something like that, or hey, I'm looking to reach this customer. Can anybody help me? Find a way to make it personal so that people stay on top of your business and you're able to share in a way that's helpful to investors, helpful to friends who want to make introduction, helpful to your ecosystem. So that's the investor newsletter. The other one's for your clients, which is a different class. So we're going to focus on this idea, right? The way that you do that is that you need a list. And so you want to make sure that either you import that or start syncing your CRM, right? And start creating a list that then filters out once you add people. So here's a contact that you might add. You can create different properties so that you're able to create list and then pull them out. So then you're going to have an investor list, you're going to have a sales list, right? And then now you're able to communicate with them. When you move away from Google Sheets and into a CRM, you want to make sure that it has a place for you to take notes, right? Now it's going to be tracking your emails because it's connected to your email account. And then that you also log in tasks. So you can set up follow-up tasks that send email reminders directly to yourself. You can assign them to yourself, to your founder. All of this makes it super easy. And it also keeps tracks of any of your meetings. This is what we use. And we used it from, a small startup when HubSpot was a startup to the now multi-billion-dollar company. Our salespeople still use a CRM, our CRM like this. So it scales with you completely. And you can also be doing both tracking, right, for your salespeople and then your investors. But when you think about, right, investors, and additionally, what are you going to need? I mentioned the meeting link. Whatever you're using, you need something. Here's how ours works. One of the benefits here is that you can do one-on-one or group. So if you have a co-founder, it just goes through both of your emails. The other benefit of having meeting links is that not only can you customize, right, what it's going to say, the scheduling, when are you actually available, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, maybe not. It gives them, right, a nice view of what it would look like. And then they can pick some time slots. And then you can also do some email communications, automations, reminders, all of that. That doesn't require you to miss any meetings. Again, the goal is put some work up front, make the timeline as short as possible, and then making sure that once you have things on the books that they actually happen. The other piece is this concept of the pipeline. We saw it in the different form in the slides. This is actually going to create, you can create deals here and start moving them through this pipeline. So you create a deal, hey, new VC, right? And you add them into the pipeline, create. Let's see where they are. And so once this gets created, you can go ahead and add the contacts, the companies, and then now start tracking from your VC deal pipeline. And my internet's being slow, so we will move on to the next one. All right, I talked about templates, right? So I included all the templates that you can do. Remember, you can also customize. So in our system, you can customize by first name. You can also keep track of your deck. A lot of people ask me, okay, I'm going to share my deck. How do I know who's viewed it? Here you can insert. It keeps track of who's clicking on it, what your open rates were. And then remember your meeting link. I'm going to show you once you send out a sequence of emails, how this meeting link will stop that sequence. So remember how I showed you 4 emails that you needed to send? So how do you stop that email chain, right? Before it goes to that second email if they've responded. Simple. You can do that by using our technology called sequences, where you can add one automated email. You add the second automated email. Let's say it doesn't matter what it is, but you can also, here's the cool part, guys. Let's say you just met somebody at a conference. You want to send them an email, a follow-up email in 3 days. You want to send them an information about hey, I just met you. Here's my deck. Would you like to schedule a time for us actually to do a demo? Email 1, email 2. All of this unenrolled criteria will stop if they schedule a meeting or they respond to this email. So you don't have to worry that, hey, they're going to get this reminder. I said it, and we're talking already, so they keep on getting these emails. No, you can send as many of these as they want. You can also send task reminders for yourself if you want to follow up with them on LinkedIn. Following up on email and LinkedIn is a great resource. So think about, what is your strategy going to be to actually outreach to these investors? How do you streamline this? Sequences is a great tool. We talked a little bit about what contact looks like. The other little piece of it is to create snippets. Snippets are things that you're always telling investors, but they're also great when you want to include them in your notes or anything like that. Remember, this interacts with your Gmail, and I'll show you how it does as well. So you can do hashtag investor demo when you're doing that. And then when you are in your notes section, you can go back to hashtag investor demo. It includes whatever your little snippet was. This is super important when you're meeting with new investors. Think about, how do you create the same process? Remember how I told you to ask a set of key questions at the beginning? So, hey, investor, what's your funding amount? How long does it take to close? What's the process? What other people need to be involved? Next steps. The more you can have like your 5 bullet points of things you need to get done in the meeting, the less you're going to forget. Right? So think about, how do you shortcut that? So one way you can do that is through this, the snippets. And remember, it's all connected to your Gmail, or any email that you're using, right? So when we think about, here's my email. Hey, I want an introduction to Y Combinator. You can actually go to your templates. You insert investor referral. That's the investor referral that we had. And then you can do that. And then, hey, you can edit any piece of it that you want. So that is it for the demo piece of it. There's a lot more to do. And what I'm going to do is also follow up with you guys on there are specific videos on how to set your free instance up. It's a great tool, so highly encourage everybody to use it. And then there's like quick, easy, short videos on how to do each step of this. I just went through it quickly, so you guys get a sense of not only do we talk about the strategy high level stuff, but how do you actually put it into motion? Because I've been to so many of these where people talk about, yeah, you should send more emails or talk about or reach out to more investors, but it's only the why, it's the what, and then it's the how do you actually do this. And the way that you're going to do this is through tracking, through having like an actual process, and then figuring out how do you smooth that process down. So that's what I have for you guys. I can talk for a longer time, but I'm happy to open it up to questions.
Awesome. That was so awesome. Thank you so much. You really kept the flow going just so nicely throughout all that. So I appreciate it. Let's just jump right into the Q&A. We have some good questions coming in right now. If you have any questions in the audience, definitely make sure to drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom. All right, let's get into it. So you gave a really great overview of like how to think about which investors are the right investors for your business. But could you talk a little bit more about like how to know if raising capital through investors is right for your business in the first place?
Yeah. Yes. Let me start off with, also I saw something from Tom Saraga in the chat, multiple pipelines. Yes, they're totally okay. And they're actually, you can run like your sales one, and then you can run your investor pipeline right on there. You just switch tabs. So really quick answer. But when you think about, is fundraising good for your business or not? Not everybody should fundraise. And frankly, it takes a lot of time. If it's not the right fit for you, you shouldn't do it. So the way you want to be thinking about it is my business able to get the revenue type that investors will want, right? And if not, then let me think about my business in a different way. And by that, you have to be thinking about it from an investor's point of view. They want to 100x their money, right? Like, are you going after a big enough market that makes sense for them? So that's why they say no to many small and pop shop type of businesses, is because the scalability isn't there. So your pitch is going to be crucial in terms of being able to storytell. Why am I going after this market? Why is it big enough? Why is the problem big enough, right? So think about it for yourself, right? Do I need the cash? How much do I need? And then also, what is the use for it? That is one key question that you have to answer to investors, right? And good answers tend to be around, hey, I'm going to raise 500,000 to continue to develop my product, hire X number of people, spend this on marketing. But you need to have a plan, right? So think about, where would you actually invest it? And remember that once you fundraise a venture capital money, you're going to have to fundraise again. So the question is, are you the type of founder that wants to be on that path, right? And once you take 500K, remember those metrics, they just get higher, and you have higher goals. Versus if you want like a lifestyle business, you can, there's a better pathway.
Totally. Awesome.
Yeah,
so that kind of brings me to like a couple questions that we have entrepreneurs have with communicating the business to investors. So like first we have a question kind of related to like what you were saying of like explaining the different purposes of like what you would be using the money for. So like, how important is it to kind of like, is the impact of the overall business itself as important to emphasize as what you're planning to do it? Like, is the impact of those actions important to emphasize along, even though, it's still kind of in the works?
It's not about so impact is great, but when you're talking particularly to investors, so remember who your audience is, I think that the way you want to talk about is, what are you testing, right? So It doesn't have to be revenue that you're bringing in, but I think what you want to be talking about, hey, I need $100,000 so we can run these ads and figure out if there's appetite for this market. Hey, I
Right.
need 500. Like, how are you moving forward? Or what the way you also do your updates is like, hey, you know what? This month we tested and we figured out like, no, that's the right path. That's an okay update. Like, and
Mhm.
figuring out what isn't working is actually great. So think about not necessarily of like the potential impact, but actually
Mhm.
like what are the steps what are you testing? And then ultimately, if you win these tests, what's the market that you can reach, right? So
Mhm.
based on this, then we can like, so think about how amazing OpenAI, but it's truly one of those revolutionary technologies, right? That can reach a mass market. It's like, how are you going to do that? What's that potential, right? Can you get investors to really see and feel and get engaged and excited? Like that's the best piece of it. They're going to say yes when they're excited. So figure out how do you story tell to get them as excited as you are. You're spending your whole day here. You're excited about it for some
Right.
reason. So articulate that to somebody else so that they can be excited with you as well.
Love it. That's awesome advice. So kind of in the same realm, we have a question related to like kind of the timing of communication with investors and, like entrepreneurs themselves or as founders are just their days, they're working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, so how do you kind of incorporate investor relations into your everyday as a founder to, maintain those relationships?
Yeah. And so a couple of ways. So that's why, like I said, you can't think about all investors at one time. So the best thing, if you think about them once a month and then like a general like newsletter, where you keep them updated. Obviously, you're going to be fielding questions as they come or as they think about. And then once a month, also look back at your pipeline and figure out, hey, who got stuck, right? Where are
Mhm.
they stuck? Should I reach back out to them? Or remember those closed no's? Like if that was 6 months ago, maybe things have changed with that closed nose. If they told you like, hey, no, you're too early. We wanted to see six more clients. The other way that's really easy for you guys to do as you guys were thinking about automation, right, is setting up a task reminder. Remember in that like contact field, it's had tasks. You're
Mhm.
going to forget about all these people because there's a lot of people. And it
Right.
doesn't mean you don't care. It just means that there is a lot for you to manage. So the best way to do
Totally.
is set up a task for 6 months from now. It sends you an email and you're like, oh, you know what, Michelle, I haven't talked to her in 6 months. Like, let me follow up with her, give her a quick update. And
Yeah.
who knows, maybe things change. Maybe she raised a new fund. I don't know. Maybe she's now investing in this sector if it's
Mhm.
new for them, right? So again, don't take a no for a complete no. It's ask questions and then figure out, is it a no, not now? And so how do you nurture those relationships? So think about the monthly thing and then the task reminders are the easiest way to do that.
I love that kind of like breaking out of the black and white thinking. That's awesome. Um, so I guess this is kind of an interesting question, and I guess this could be taken as like more subjective. So like for entrepreneurs and many of those who are in the audience are leading purpose-driven businesses. So how might taking on investors, how might they think about how that would affect your vision or your mission for the business?
It can be very great, right? So you can think about products like Warby Parker, right, does one where they give back like one glasses, like one pair of glasses for everyone that you buy or something like that. And there's the sock company Bombas. They started off, so Bombas, and I've interviewed the founders there. They started off in they were driven by this passion because in homeless shelters, like the number one ask is for socks.
Mhm.
They get dirty and right weather, and there's so many reasons why socks are like kind of these things that you go through quickly. And that was originally why they started to do it. And then they perfected the technology behind a sock, right?
Right.
And made a better sock. I think they're fabulous. They're soft. They're great. You should try
Yeah.
them. But that's how you drive purpose with business, right? At the end of the day, I think purpose can help people stop, pay attention, engage with you, connect with you. But the second piece of it, then you want to get investors to actually write a check, means that the business piece of it needs to be very sound and right and clarified for them. So I think they're a great way to engage and get the conversation going, as long as it's backed up with like, okay, then how do you actually scale a sock business? Then what are the numbers of like actual sock purchases? Who are you going to sell them to first, right? What's your go-to-market strategy? You can't just sell them to the whole world. And they didn't start off that way, right? They had a very clear plan of how are they going to sell socks. And think about that, it's such a beautiful, simple story, right? These people out of the blue are trying to sell socks, and you're like, but there's tons of sock companies. How do you differentiate that, right? And not only that, like condensing your story into then something that's going to be compelling, that's where the magic happens. And you do that again by thinking through, how is my investor? Your investor is your customer for now, right? And so how are they going to perceive that? How are they viewing this? How are they hearing this story, which can be very different. And your story will pivot a little, right? If you're trying to sell an employee versus if you're trying to sell an investor, but similarly. So the same thing, you can run pipelines for your people that you're trying to attract, right? So where are they at in the process, like moving them through that pipeline? Your pitch might change a little because you're emphasizing different things that that particular customer cares about.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great way to think about it. So, you know, of course, like the gap in access to capital for female entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color is really huge. So how might entrepreneurs who identify with an underrepresented community, how might they go into these conversations? Like, what suggestions do you have in terms of like the mindset that they can kind of take on to enter into these conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those of you who can't tell by my last name, I'm also my parents are Mexican, so I'm a big fan of sort of underrepresented, like supporting underrepresented people, and including female, and I hope you can tell. But additionally, I think it's really looking at how do you actually see yourself, right? And focusing on what matters. I think you still have to cast a broad array. I think additionally, there's unique opportunities that you can go after, right? But that's not going to be like all of your like funding. So the good news is I think that there's a lot of new VCs that are addressing this market. So you should absolutely create a list and target them. Those are people that you can like cold email outreach, like that's a great thing, right? The other thing is that I think what you have now is an opportunity for support networks. So if there's anything that you can join so that you're learning, anybody on here, right? You guys are already part of a community of like Nasdaq, but the more you can lean on from like learning from each other and best practices, think about who is in your squad, right? Of like going through the same thing. You can also think about mentorship is different, right? You need mentors for different things, and investors may not necessarily be your best mentor because they don't know exactly how to do it. But another startup can be a great mentor. So if they're just one step ahead of you, hey, you just closed your A round. How did you do that? Do you mind if I like pick your brain a little? Like think about like how and where you can find your own mentorship and try to adapting your own process. Like if that worked for them. I think that the other thing is also to be authentic to yourself, right? So when I say these templates, make them in your own voice. Like if you are like heavy numbers, like more like, black and white kind of cut, like to the actual like science, like do that and embrace that, right? So for everybody, I think it's just about embracing like who you are and having that ring through and leading from an authentic place of what's driving you to launch the startup. Why should other people care about it? Why is this going to provide the returns? At the end of the day, returns matter because they fund that next level of cycle. And remember that no matter like how passionate you are about your thing, the way that you're going to impact the world is actually through having a successful business that can scale up and affect more people. So think about it that way. Like think about what additional resources are available to you. And at the end of the day, like you're also going through a similar process. So the more prepared you are, the more of a tight process that you run, the better you can actually fundraise. Any additional questions? I think we're at time, but
I think we are at time. I think if you just had one key takeaway, one piece of wisdom that you kind of wanted to leave the audience with, related to this or personal, what would that be?
Yes. One thing is that I think knowledge is potential power. What really drives power is actually action, right? So I've given you lots of potential power, like through the talk and slides and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's really about what you do with it, what you decide to do with it. So think about it and don't just say yeah, I'm definitely going to do it. Put it on your calendar, take some action towards actually creating a process that's going to work for you, because that's actually what's going to pay 10 times fold. And that's what's going to have a return on your hour today, is actually to putting something into action. So whatever it is, what I encourage everybody is to take action. And when in doubt, take action. When you're feeling sad, take action to move forward. When you're feeling doubtful about and not courageous about nobody investing in you, take action. Email somebody, email an investor. When you get a no, email 5 more investors. Again, the game is action and forward motion. So action forward instead of just kind of this passive approach. So if that's one key takeaway, is remember action and forward motion. That's it.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to our community, share your insights, and set just such an amazing overview. On behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today, we sincerely thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Loved it. Thank you, everyone.
And to everyone in attendance, we would love for you to join us for our upcoming webinars. You can view them by using the link in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.